The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the harsh hum of a car engine idling on a deserted street. Oliver, the scarred stray, trembled inside a rusty crate, his golden eyes wide with fear. His fur was matted from days without care, his thin body pressed against the cold bars. The door of the car slammed, and a man's voice cut the air with indifference. Daniel said, "You're useless now." He lifted the crate roughly and tossed it to the roadside. The crash echoed against the brick walls, startling Oliver. The cat cried out, his voice weak but piercing, a plea swallowed by the night. His paw pressed against the bent bars, claws scraping hopelessly. The headlights cut through the fog, illuminating his trembling form. The man turned away, his face cold, his heart untouched. The car roared to life, pulling into the distance, leaving behind silence once more. Oliver pressed his head low, his breath shallow. His scar caught the glow of the streetlight, a reminder of battles survived. The world had abandoned him, but the story of his fight was only beginning. The street returned to silence, broken only by Oliver's shallow breaths. He pressed against the bent bars, desperate to escape. His body shook as cold seeped into his fur. The crate rattled faintly as he pushed with all his strength. Daniel's car was gone, but the echo of his cruelty lingered in the air. Oliver's mind replayed the voice, the dismissal, the violence. He clawed harder, the sound scratching across the night like a broken song. His golden eyes glowed in the dim streetlight, filled with a mixture of terror and determination. He would not surrender to the darkness. He whispered inside himself, "I must live." His scarred face pressed forward, refusing to fade. Somewhere deep inside, hope flickered, fragile yet unbroken. The air grew heavier, and Oliver collapsed briefly against the bars, panting. His body was weak, but his spirit pushed against despair. A shadow moved across the far end of the alley, but it was only the shifting fog. The loneliness cut deeper than hunger. He thought of warmth once known, a fleeting memory of soft hands, now replaced with betrayal. Daniel's cruelty had left scars not only on his face but in his heart. His ears twitched at a distant sound, the cry of another small animal. His golden eyes widened, sensing he was not alone. The night, though cruel, whispered faintly that survival was not his burden alone. Fear blended with curiosity, giving him reason to remain alert, even as exhaustion pulled at his body. Oliver's heart pounded as the faint sound of mewing grew clearer. A kitten's voice, fragile and trembling, echoed through the alley. He lifted his head, his ears perked despite fatigue. His eyes darted, straining through the crate's narrow gaps. A small silhouette moved uncertainly in the fog, tiny paws unsteady against the cracked ground. Oliver's chest tightened at the sight, a reminder of innocence nearly destroyed by cruelty. His claws dug harder into the crate bars, his protective instinct igniting stronger than fear. He whispered inside, "Not again, not another left like me." His scar caught the dim light, a badge of both pain and strength. Though trapped, his spirit surged with renewed urgency, refusing to allow despair to win. The kitten stumbled closer, its tiny body shaking with cold. Oliver pressed himself against the bars, his golden eyes burning with fierce protectiveness. The kitten's cry was soft but carried the weight of suffering. Oliver's body trembled as he tried to reach her, his paw sliding uselessly through the narrow gap. He hissed, not in anger but in warning to the night that preyed on the weak. The alley seemed to close in, darkness swallowing hope, yet the presence of the fragile creature reignited a spark inside him. The kitten stopped, staring at him with wide, innocent eyes, and Oliver felt his purpose shift. No longer just survival, but the duty to protect. In that moment, trapped and broken, a new strength was born within him. The night gave way to the first faint light of dawn, spilling pale gold across the cracked pavement. Oliver lifted his head, his body aching but his spirit refusing surrender. His golden eyes lingered on the small kitten nearby, her white fur tangled, her body trembling in the cold air. He pressed his scarred face against the crate bars, watching her shuffle closer. Memories swelled within him, brief flashes of warmth and belonging, of gentle hands that once held him safe. The betrayal cut deep, but the memory carried both pain and longing. He whispered silently to himself, "I once had love." The kitten's eyes mirrored his own fear, and Oliver realized she needed more than sympathy. She needed protection. His claws scraped gently at the crate's bent corner, trying again to push it open. Every muscle screamed exhaustion, but he found new strength in her presence. Hope was no longer distant, it was standing before him, small yet alive. The alley brightened with the slow rise of the sun, illuminating the cracks in the world that had abandoned them. Oliver's eyes softened as he studied the kitten's unsteady steps. His memory pulled him into the past, where once he was a cherished companion. A young boy had hugged him, whispering secrets into his ear. Laughter had filled the home, warmth wrapped around every corner. Then Daniel appeared in his mind again, cold and harsh, the man who had replaced love with cruelty. Oliver's breath grew heavy, torn between memory and reality. The kitten mewed faintly, breaking his spiraling thoughts. He lowered his head, forcing himself into the present, into her need. His golden eyes blazed, as if promising her silently, "I won't fail you." His scar was no longer just a reminder of suffering. It was proof of survival, a shield he would now use for her. The alley carried a stillness heavy with unspoken fears. Oliver clawed once more at the bent bars, his breath fast and uneven. The crate rattled with each desperate push. The kitten sat a few feet away, her wide eyes unblinking, drawn to his struggle. She tilted her small head, curiosity mixing with caution. Oliver growled softly, a protective rumble warning unseen dangers to stay back. His ears twitched at every faint sound, the drip of water, the creak of wind-blown metal. The morning was alive, but the world felt hostile. He pressed harder, his scarred cheek rubbing raw against steel. He hissed in frustration, but did not stop. The kitten mewed again, timid yet insistent, as if urging him on. His body shook with effort, yet something deeper drove him beyond survival, the call to protect, even when trapped. The kitten's steps grew braver as she edged closer, her paws silent on cracked stone. Oliver's eyes followed her carefully, a mix of concern and pride. He let out a low, reassuring growl, softer than before, urging her forward. She trembled but pressed on, inch by inch, her innocence cutting through the harsh morning. Oliver's heart ached as he recognized her courage. His scar burned, a reminder of his own lost innocence, but now he saw it reborn in her. He pawed the bars again, not in desperation but in rhythm, as though keeping time with her small steps. The alley seemed less empty, less cruel, with her presence near. The first fragile connection between them formed like a thread of light in the fog. For the first time, Oliver felt that he was not alone, and neither was she. The kitten stopped just beside the crate, her body quivering, but her eyes fixed on Oliver. Their gaze locked, two souls abandoned, yet bound by need. Oliver lowered his head, pressing his scarred cheek to the cold bars as if to reassure her. He whispered within, "You're safe with me." The kitten tilted her head, tiny mew escaping her mouth, her trust fragile but real. For the first time since his abandonment, Oliver felt the crushing weight of loneliness lift slightly. The fog no longer seemed endless. Hope had taken shape, not in freedom, but in the bond of two broken lives meeting in the ruins. The alley was still cracked, still cold, but within the shadows, a new story began. One of trust, of protection, and of a fragile but growing family. The morning stretched into a harsh day, and hunger gnawed at Oliver's frail body. His ribs pressed against his thin skin, his breath shallow as he pawed again at the crate. The kitten pressed closer, her mews faint but filled with need. Oliver felt his own weakness rising, yet her presence anchored him to survival. A crow landed nearby, pecking at discarded food, its harsh caw echoing. Oliver's golden eyes narrowed, protective instincts surging stronger than his failing body. He hissed, warning it away though trapped. The crow flapped loudly into the air, its wings beating like thunder. The kitten pressed her tiny body against the crate, seeking safety. Oliver lowered his head close to her, whispering silently, "I'll protect you." The world's cruelty weighed heavy, yet the bond growing between them was his new strength. He was starving, but for her sake he endured. The sound of footsteps echoed through the alley, heavy and deliberate. Oliver stiffened, his scar twitching as fear resurfaced. A man's figure appeared in the distance, Daniel. His cold eyes scanned the ground as if searching. The kitten froze, her small body trembling. Oliver pressed against the crate, his growl low and fierce. Daniel stepped closer, his shadow stretching long across the pavement. He muttered bitterly, "Strays never learn." His boots struck the ground with cruel rhythm, each step louder, colder. Oliver's golden eyes locked on him, hatred burning hotter than fear. He scraped claws against the metal, a defiant sound in the silence. Daniel sneered at the sight, smirking at Oliver's helpless rage. The kitten whimpered, her cry soft but sharp. Oliver hissed, his body pressed forward, every ounce of him alive with defiance against the man who had cast him away. Daniel crouched before the crate, his lips curling into a cruel smile. He tapped the bars with his boot, watching Oliver's furious reaction. Oliver lunged forward, striking his paw between the gaps, claws desperate to reach him. Daniel laughed harshly, his voice sharp. "Still fighting? Pointless." His words cut like knives, but Oliver's rage was louder than despair. The kitten whimpered, pressing back against the wall, her tiny body shivering. Oliver's growl deepened, his scarred face pressed hard against the steel. The sound echoed through the alley, defiance embodied in one broken body, refusing surrender. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes cold, studying the scar as though mocking it. Oliver snapped his jaws, teeth flashing. Daniel pulled back slightly, muttering, "Not worth saving." His indifference stung deeper than cruelty. Yet Oliver's spirit burned stronger, because the kitten needed him to resist. Daniel rose and kicked the crate harshly, the sound of metal clanging against stone filling the alley. Oliver yowled in pain but held firm, his eyes locked with fury. The kitten squealed, stumbling back in terror, her tiny body shaking. Daniel's face twisted with disdain, his hand tightening into a fist before he stepped closer again. "You're nothing," he muttered coldly. Oliver crouched low, every muscle tense despite his weakness, his body shielding the kitten in spirit, though the bars confined him. He pressed his scarred cheek against the crate door, golden eyes unyielding. His growl rolled like thunder, carrying both pain and promise. The alley seemed to darken around them, cruelty pressing heavy, yet Oliver's spirit surged brighter. He refused to break. He refused to abandon her, no matter the blows. In defiance, his will sharpened into unshakable strength. The world grew still after Daniel's steps retreated, his shadow fading into the light beyond the alley. Oliver's body trembled with exhaustion, his breath ragged, but his eyes never wavered from the path Daniel had taken. The kitten crept closer, her paws soft against the stone, her eyes wide with trust. Oliver lowered his head against the crate bars, his scar aching, but his spirit unwavering. He pressed his paw out, brushing the ground as if reaching for her. The kitten sniffed timidly, then pressed her tiny head gently near his paw. A fragile bond sealed itself in that moment, unspoken but unbreakable. The cruelty of man had tried to silence him, but instead it forged his resolve. His golden eyes glowed faintly, not with fear, but with purpose. The fight was only beginning, and together they would face it. The alley fell silent again, the cruel echo of Daniel's presence fading into the distance. Oliver lowered his head, his golden eyes heavy with exhaustion, but something stirred within his memory. He remembered a warm voice from years past, a boy calling his name, laughter filling the air. Oliver had once been loved deeply, not born into the streets but thrown into them after betrayal. His scar was not only from battles, but also from abandonment that carved through his life. The kitten mewed softly, pulling him back from memory. She pressed close, her fragile body trembling, and Oliver realized the truth. He had belonged once, he could belong again. The thought struck like lightning, shifting despair into a new purpose. He whispered silently to himself, "I was meant for more." For the first time since captivity, hope burned inside his scarred chest. As twilight began to fall, a new figure entered the alley, steps lighter, careful, not like Daniel's harsh rhythm. A woman bent down near the shadows, her eyes filled with compassion. Her name was Sarah, a shelter worker hardened by pain yet softened by empathy. Her tired face bore the marks of long nights, but her gaze glowed with warmth. She spotted Oliver inside the crate and whispered gently, "Oh, you poor soul." Oliver's body stiffened at first, distrust raw and sharp. The kitten mewed softly, pulling closer to the woman's voice. Sarah extended her hand carefully, her voice calm, soothing as water. Oliver's golden eyes narrowed, conflicted between instinct and the faint pull of trust. For the first time, a human's presence did not sting with cruelty. The possibility of rescue shimmered faintly like a fragile flame. Suddenly Daniel's figure appeared again at the far end of the alley, his steps sharp and angry. Sarah rose quickly, her eyes flashing with resolve as she spotted him. "You left him here," she demanded. Daniel sneered, shrugging as if the animals were worthless. His cold words dripped with cruelty. "Trash doesn't deserve a home." Oliver growled, his golden eyes blazing, his body tense with fury. The kitten whimpered, pressing into the corner. Sarah stood her ground, her voice shaking but strong. "No creature is trash." Daniel scoffed, his face twisted with disdain, then turned as if to walk away. The encounter revealed a deep truth to Oliver. Not all humans were the same. There was cruelty, yes, but also compassion that could fight against it. For the first time, light broke through the wall of distrust he had built. As Daniel stormed away, Sarah crouched once more, her voice softening. Oliver's ears twitched, still wary, but pulled toward her kindness. She spoke as though he could understand every word. "You deserve better than this." Her tired eyes reflected both grief and hope. Oliver's golden gaze lingered, studying her carefully. He remembered the betrayal of trust once broken, but something in her tone stirred a new possibility. The kitten stepped forward, brushing against Sarah's hand with timid courage. Sarah smiled faintly, tears glistening at the edges of her eyes. "Brave little one," she whispered. Oliver pressed his paw against the crate bars, not reaching for escape, but reaching toward connection. It was a fragile moment, the spark of trust born from pain, nurtured by compassion. The first steps of healing had begun. The night deepened, the stars faint above the broken rooftops, but the alley no longer felt entirely cold. Sarah whispered, "I'll come back for you, I promise." Her words lingered in the air like a vow. Oliver's heart beat faster, torn between fear and a fragile thread of hope. The kitten curled close against the crate, her tiny body trusting in Sarah's presence. Oliver's scar caught the dim glow, no longer a mark of shame but a sign of endurance. He lowered his head, golden eyes never leaving Sarah as she slowly walked away. His breath slowed, not with despair but with cautious anticipation. For the first time, the darkness was not empty. Somewhere beyond the cruelty, a hand had reached toward him. His journey was no longer only about survival. It was about finding a place to belong again. The following night returned heavier than before, storm clouds gathering above the broken alley. Oliver crouched low, his golden eyes scanning the shadows. The kitten pressed close to his side, trembling with each rumble of thunder. Suddenly, Daniel appeared once more, his boots striking the wet pavement. His face was twisted with anger, his voice sharp and cold. "I should have finished this sooner." He kicked at the crate again, the blow rattling Oliver's body. But instead of cowering, Oliver pressed forward, his scar burning like fire. He hissed fiercely, a sound filled with defiance, refusing to back down. The kitten whimpered but stayed near, trusting his protection. The storm above roared, mirroring the battle brewing in the alley. This was no longer just about survival. It was confrontation, the moment he could no longer avoid. His resolve was iron, his spirit unshaken. Oliver lunged forward, claws slashing between the bars, his roar echoing through the storm. Daniel cursed, stepping back with surprise. The kitten squealed, her tiny body trembling, but her gaze fixed on Oliver's bravery. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the scar on Oliver's cheek like a battle mark. Daniel sneered and leaned down, hand reaching toward the crate to grab him. Oliver lashed out again, his claws nearly catching flesh. "Still fighting?" Daniel muttered, but his voice carried frustration. Oliver's body shook, his strength dwindling, yet his spirit refused surrender. Every muscle burned, but the fire in his golden eyes refused to dim. The storm howled louder, the world itself seemed to rage alongside him. Kitten mewed, a fragile cry that sounded like encouragement. This was no longer helpless resistance. This was the beginning of his stand. Just as Daniel leaned in closer, another sound broke through the storm. Steady footsteps approaching from the opposite end of the alley. Sarah appeared, soaked from rain but unwavering in resolve. "Step away from him," she shouted, her voice cutting through the thunder. Daniel turned sharply, his expression twisting into disdain. "He's worthless," he spat. Sarah's eyes burned with determination as she moved closer, shielding herself against the downpour. Oliver's gaze flicked toward her, hope flickering inside his scarred chest. The kitten pressed her body tighter to the crate, her small eyes wide as if sensing salvation. Daniel scoffed, but his confidence wavered. Sarah's voice rose again, filled with strength. "Not worthless. He's alive, and that matters." For Oliver, the storm no longer felt hopeless. He was not alone in this fight anymore. The storm intensified, rain hammering down as tension reached its peak. Daniel stepped forward, fury rising, but Sarah did not flinch. She moved quickly, crouching near the crate, placing her hand firmly on its door. "Not this time," she said firmly. Oliver pressed forward, golden eyes blazing, sensing her intent to protect. Daniel snarled, his hand lifting as though to strike, but Oliver hissed so fiercely that it startled even him. The kitten mewed, her small voice piercing through the chaos like a cry for justice. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling like drums of war. Sarah stood her ground, her presence a shield between cruelty and the defenseless. Oliver's heart surged with a strength deeper than survival. This was his fight. Her fight, their fight together. The climax was no longer just approaching. It had arrived. The storm reached its crescendo as Daniel cursed and finally retreated, defeated by the force of resistance and Sarah's unyielding stance. His figure vanished into the night, swallowed by rain and thunder. Oliver collapsed against the crate bars, his body exhausted, but his golden eyes burned with triumph. Sarah pressed her hand gently against him, whispering softly, "You're safe now." The kitten nestled beside Oliver, her small body trembling but comforted by the warmth of his presence. For the first time, victory felt real. The storm still raged, but within the chaos, a fragile peace formed. Oliver closed his eyes briefly, breathing deeply, knowing the hardest moment had passed. His scar glistened under the rain, no longer just a mark of pain but a badge of survival. A new chapter had opened, one forged in defiance, courage, and hope. The storm had passed, leaving the alley drenched in silence. Rainwater trickled along the broken pavement, reflecting the faint glow of street lamps. Sarah crouched near the crate, her face weary but filled with quiet determination. She worked carefully, prying at the bent metal, whispering softly, "You're safe now." Oliver pressed forward, golden eyes fixed on her, wary yet drawn to the warmth in her tone. His scarred cheek glistened with droplets, a reminder of what he had endured. The kitten stayed pressed close to his side, shivering but calmer now, as though sensing the change in the air. With one final effort, the crate's latch gave way, the door swinging open slowly. Oliver froze, unsure of freedom, his paws hesitant on the threshold. The world beyond was still harsh, but for the first time, it did not feel empty. The journey of healing had begun. The crate door creaked fully open, and Sarah stepped back slowly, giving space instead of forcing trust. Oliver crouched low, paws steady on the edge of freedom, his golden eyes sharp with suspicion. The kitten stepped first, tiny paws touching wet ground, her fragile body trembling but daring. She looked back at Oliver, mewing softly, as if calling him forward. His heart surged at her courage, and with a hesitant step he followed. His body shook, Scar catching the lamplight, but he kept moving, guided by her innocence. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "That's it, you're free now." Oliver paused, sniffing the air, searching for danger, then pressed closer to the kitten protectively. His first steps outside the crate were not just escape, they were a choice to live again. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a blanket, laying it gently on the ground. The kitten stumbled toward it eagerly, curling into the warmth, her body fragile but safe. Oliver followed slowly, crouching low as his eyes scanned for threats. His body still trembled from hunger and exhaustion, but the sight of the kitten at peace softened his caution. Sarah whispered gently, "Rest, both of you." She extended her hand slowly, not to grab, but to offer comfort. Oliver sniffed, his scar brushing the air between them, before retreating slightly, not ready yet. Still, he did not hiss. That silence was the first step of trust. The alley no longer echoed with despair. It carried the fragile weight of healing. The storm had passed, but its lesson remained. Survival had turned into connection. The night deepened, the alley wrapped in soft silence broken only by water dripping from rooftops. Oliver sat watchful, his golden eyes glowing faintly under the lamplight. The kitten slept soundly, curled against the blanket, her breathing even. Sarah remained close, leaning against the wall, her face weary but filled with relief. She whispered, almost to herself, "No one will hurt you again." Oliver studied her, torn between instinct and the pull of her kindness. His scar throbbed faintly, a reminder of betrayal, yet her steady presence calmed the storm inside him. He shifted closer to the blanket, lowering himself beside the kitten, his protective nature stronger than fear. For the first time in countless nights, he lay not in isolation, but in the fragile safety of companionship. The world had not healed him yet, but it had given him a reason to keep going. Hours passed, and the storm-washed alley turned quiet as dawn approached. A faint orange glow spread across the horizon, brushing life into the broken streets. Oliver stirred, stretching stiffly, his golden eyes watching as the kitten shifted closer against him. Sarah rose to her feet, brushing rain from her coat, determination on her face. She looked at Oliver and whispered, "Come with me." He hesitated, eyes narrowing with distrust, but the kitten mewed softly, pressing against him as if urging him forward. His scar caught the morning light, and for the first time, it seemed less like a wound and more like a symbol of survival. Oliver stepped cautiously toward Sarah, not fully trusting, but not resisting either. Together, scarred and fragile, they moved toward something new, the fragile beginnings of belonging. The dawn spread golden light across the streets, softening the broken edges of the city. Sarah walked slowly, leading Oliver and the kitten away from the alley. Each step was hesitant, but filled with quiet strength. Oliver kept close, his golden eyes alert, but no longer filled only with fear. The kitten bounded lightly at his side, her small frame shaking with excitement. Sarah whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Her words carried like a promise through the morning air. Oliver's scar glowed faintly, no longer just a wound but a mark of survival. The city that once abandoned him now seemed less cold, for he was no longer walking it alone. They reached a quiet corner where the storm had left puddles shimmering like glass. Sarah paused, crouching down to the animal's level. Oliver sat tall, Scar catching the sunlight, his golden eyes steady. The kitten leaned against him, her trust absolute. Sarah reached out, her hand brushing gently against Oliver's fur for the first time. He flinched but did not pull away, his breath steadying as her touch grew softer. The silence spoke louder than words. A bridge had been built, fragile but real. Sarah whispered, "You belong with us." The moment felt eternal, a spark of family forming amidst brokenness. For the first time in years, Oliver allowed himself to close his eyes without fear. Sarah's hand rested gently near him, steady and reassuring. The kitten purred softly, her fragile body curled against his side. Around them, the city awoke, its noise distant but not threatening. Oliver's scar no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a story carried with pride. He leaned his head slightly into Sarah's touch, a quiet acceptance. The kitten stretched, her tiny paw resting across Oliver's, a bond of innocence uniting them. The morning was no longer cruel. It was alive with belonging. They continued walking together, leaving the alley and its shadows behind. Sarah led with quiet strength, Oliver by her side, the kitten bouncing between them. The city's harshness faded in the glow of the rising sun. Oliver's scar reflected the light, now a symbol of endurance and resilience. Sarah glanced down with a smile, whispering, "We're a family now." The kitten mewed happily, her fragile frame filled with renewed energy. Oliver's golden eyes softened, his spirit finally finding peace. The streets ahead no longer felt endless, they felt like a path leading home. They reached a hill where the sun rose fully, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Sarah stopped, letting Oliver and the kitten stand ahead. Oliver gazed toward the horizon, golden eyes blazing with quiet triumph. The kitten sat beside him, her innocence a symbol of hope restored. Sarah watched them, tears of relief glistening in her eyes. In that moment, scars, fear, and loss melted into something greater, belonging. The world remained imperfect, but within it, they had found each other. Oliver lifted his head high, scar glowing like a badge, his new life beginning.